I think we're ready to go. Hopefully, there's no echo and people can hear me on Zoom. Absolute pleasure today to introduce Yunzhe, who did his PhD at UCL with Ray Dole and Tim Behrens and is now running his own group at Beijing Normal University in China. Had the pleasure of seeing like some of this work at a laboratory 2 years ago, and it's like really ambitious, beautiful science. So I hope you all enjoy. And also thank you to Yunzhe for being available at 8 p.m. Beijing time for us to enjoy his talk. So thanks so much. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone. Can you guys hear me? And can you guys see the slides? Cool. All right. Yeah. So what I'm going to talk about is something we have been working on in the last like 3 or 4 years. So it's really taking an idea, like an idea from computational cognitive neuroscience that is we not only just in physical space, but also in conceptual space, we have this grid cell-like neural code that we can measure non-invasively using fMRI. And we want to take this measure and to say whether this can also be the cellular mechanism underlying the development of intelligence, for example. All right, cool. So, so just just a head. So today, what I'm going to talk about would be two studies, and none of them are published, and both of them are about development. So you're going to say a lot of correlations. This is a cross-sectional study, so there's nothing longitudinal, but we're hoping to gather longitudinal data as well in the next several years. But today, basically, what I'm going to show you are correlational in essence. So just to have that in mind, basically. Cool. All right. So the development of intelligence, right? So I mean, this is something we all care about, right? So in general, we would say this intelligence develop alongside an increasing structural knowledge, which we sometimes call cognitive map if we are if we like Tolman, or we call that a schema if we are cognitive neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, where we heard from Piaget, for example. So the good thing of having a structural knowledge would be twofold. One is that we can infer an unseen relationship between the existing knowledge, right? To make an inference between two no knowledge, but but we have never observed their relationship before. Another thing good about having this structural knowledge is that we can use it to assimilate new knowledge. Indeed, like what Piaget has trying to argue is that the intelligence develop because we have this adaptation and assimilation kind of process, right? So if this existing schema is good enough, consistent with current environment, we're going to use it to assimilate new knowledge. If the current schema is no longer congruent with the current information, we're going to adapt schema, trying to make a new one. So today, the task I'm going to show you and the data I'm going to show you really focusing on first one. That is, can we build a schema and can we use the schema to assimilate new knowledge given this information are congruent with the current schema. Cool. Yeah. So through the, I don't know how many people familiar with those developmental neuroscience literature. Um, and to be honest, I'm not an expert on the developmental neuroscience literature, but my read of this field is there's a lot of correlations and there's a lot of big data. So we're going to say, like, for example, this Nature paper where they have like combined millions of MRI scans across of the world and trying to have this kind of map, right? It tells you like for different measures of those structure like markers and say which we're going to develop first and which we're going to gradually decay, etc., etc. It's really do a mapping, right? A mapping of how certain markers that you can derive from the fMRI or MR, or structure MRI or diffusion MRI, and say how it developed with age, basically. Of course, there are also some work in the resting state network and say something again like functional gradient, so to speak, that are going to co-vary with age. There's also some cognitive psychology work where people generally correlate the IQs that you can measure through this standard IQ test, like Raven test, or this Wechsler IQ scales for children, for example, which is quite a standard one. And then you can correlate that with certain like neural markers. Like here, this is volume. This is gray matter volumes, like for example, hippocampus, and you can say gradually, like it also through age, where there's anti-correlation between the volume and the inference performance, which is a standard task in the intelligence like scale, basically. But in general, I would say that there is not much of the mechanism, a lot much of understanding of how the cognition develop, and let alone to have a neural code or something we can link the basic neuroscience and this cognitive psychology or even these real world intelligence measures. So basically, what we want to do is trying to say whether we can link those things together, whether we can find a neural mechanism that have some link with this intelligence evolution idea that from Piaget. So we're going to, for the first study, we're going to try to solve trying to tackle two problems. One is how does this structural knowledge and this inference ability involve in the brain? And then the second would be how does the brain assimilate new information into the existing knowledge? Cool. So this work is led by Yukun. Well, this is basically his baby for for working for this in the last like 4 years. Cool. All right. So we all know from cognitive neuroscience, cognitive and computational neuroscience, some of the work are basically done in Oxford from people we all know. So in general, there are two neural representations that can measure structural knowledge in the brain. One would be this map-like representation, right? So it's like associations between specific objects in a concrete map, right? For example, in this study, where Mona asked people just say those pictures, but those pictures are actually come from a statistical structure they have previously learned. And you can say in your brain, you have certain brain regions that actually encoding the distance between those concrete objects. And you can think about one way to measure that would be like a successor representation kind of idea. When you after you have encountered those things many times, you have a rough idea which thing going to follow which thing, right? Or in general, right? So this is the general idea of successor representation that basically measures the future occupancy of the state starting from the current state. If you think it keep with the current policy, basically. There is another beautiful representation that is basically like an abstract coordinate system in the brain. Um, so we we know in the adrenal cortex we have this cell called grid cell that normally fire in these hexagonal patterns. What is good about that is it doesn't remap across different environments, right? So it has like a slight orientation shift, but in general, the mapping doesn't change. So you could think that as a candidate for this schema idea, right? So if we have a current schema and if we have grid cell to represent those things, we can use this grid cell representation trying to align with the new information in order to assimilate. And this idea of this grid-like code can actually also be measured non-invasively in fMRI. So it has been first shown by Christian Donner and Neil Burgers in the physical space, and then later on by Alexa and the team in the continuous conceptual space, and in the I think like 3 years ago by Park and Eric Bowman, like have they show you can also measure this gray light code in a discrete social space. So we basically take this idea forward and we're going to ask the young children to also form this discrete space. So what I'm going to do in this study is we trying to link all those things together. So all the subjects going to take the intelligence skills, do the task in the functional MI, in the functional MI. We're also going to get their structure MI and diffusion MI. So for people who didn't know, the structure MI basically can tell you like the can derive certain measures of their, for example, the volume thickness, those kind of measure. And the diffusion MI would be a way to can trying to get the structure connectivity between different brain regions. So it's trying to measure the white matters in your brain. All right, cool. So here is the design. So I'm going to spend like 2 or 3 minutes on this slide because it's very important people understand how we do the task. So this is a developmental task, right? And the thing we want to study is quite abstract or quite advanced cognition. We want to study the ability that can be built upon on forming a cognitive map. So the first thing we need to make sure is that anything we can find is not due to some systematic difference between adults and children, and it's not because of they already have certain difference in the low level basic cognition, for example, memory. So this is how we do it. This learning sessions that we call piecemeal learning happens all of the scan. Okay, so people with different age would take different time to to um, to remember all those associations. So this is a discrete space with like 5 by 5. So it's like have 2 dimensions, and people need to remember all the 100 pairwise associations. Okay, so the learning session like this. So each of the object have 2 dimensions. One is the attack power, another is the defense power. And the subject's going to learn the relative rank within the feature for all those pairwise, objects. So as long as the subject concerns, the piecemeal learning task really just a memory task. Okay, so they're going to memorize all those things. So they're going to learn, for example, this maple is smaller than this lamp in the attack power. Okay, and this clock is bigger than this cat in the defense power. And again, all those rank only have 1 rank difference. Okay, so that's why we call that pairwise memory. And because we want to ensure all the subjects have all the information they know to build the cognitive map, so we made this kind of criteria. That is, in the very end, when subjects take a test of all those information together, their memory performance has to be more than 80%. Otherwise, they will not be invited to the future experiment. Okay. So just to be clear, the subject don't really know the structure, although the structure is like those 25 objects are embedded in a 5 by 5 like 2D map, a 2D knowledge map, but the subjects don't know. For all the subjects concerned, as far as they know, this really is a memory task, okay? They need to memorize all the 100 like associations. And yes, people take different time to learn it, and only the people who can learn it and only the people who are willing to take part in the subsequent experiment are invited for the FMI scan, for the FMI experiment and also MEG experiment that I'm going to talk later in the second part of the talk. All right. And for the people who already have all the information, they're going to be invited to take this map-based inference task. So in this task, they're only going to do 2D inference. When I say 2D inference, what I mean is they're going to try to compare an attack power of one object to a defense power of another object. Okay, this these things they have never do before, right? All the learning happens within a feature dimension and always pairwise. And in the map-based inference, everything done in every all the comparisons done between the dimensions, between the feature dimensions. So basically, all of the inference in the fMI scan are lower 2D inference tasks that you cannot solve by memory alone. Okay, and after that, we're gonna to again in the fMI scan, we're gonna to introduce another four new objects. We're gonna call that local learning, and we're gonna to embed these four objects in the center of the maze. Okay, after they have learned that, they're going to enter the fMI again and do this long local inference task. We're also going to call them game two in this task. And then in the game two, what the subject need to do is we're going to ask them to infer the relationship between those newly learned objects and with those unlearned non-local objects that are already in the map. Okay, so for example, for this bear, we put here in the center of the maze, and we learn where the bear is by learning its relationship with its neighbors, like with the book, with the maples, and then doing the non-local inference, subject's going to infer the relationship, for example, between the bear and the basketball. Okay, so they so we call that a non-local inference because we do not learning any relationship between the basketball and the bear, right? So the way they can do it is by assimilate, or well, one way to do it would be assimilate those new knowledge in the existing map, and then they can have a rough and intuitive idea how can compare those two things together. Okay, cool. So this is task. Just to be clear, everybody's following that. Any questions before I continue? Okay. Yeah.
It's all good, Yunzhe.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to continue. Great. All right. So here is the behavior. So first, although we have this 80% of the memory criteria, still you say like there is a general increase with age. Okay, just approaching the significance. But you can see this map-based inferencing and non-local inferencing really have a stronger correlation with age. And all of this exists after you controlling for the correlation with memory. Okay. And this correlation, this non-local inference correlation with age also maintained even you controlling for the map base, that is the game one inference performance. So what that this means is beyond memorizing objects and beyond making inference between those unobserved relationships, you also have this selective age-related increase or development effect on assimilating new knowledge. So that basically means it is possible this non-local inferencing is measuring something different compared to the map-based inference. Okay, and then now we're going to look for the neural data. So as I said, the thing we really care about is whether we can use this very well defined and beautifully detected cellular mechanism in fMI that we call grid code. Okay, so I'm not going into the detail of how we do the analysis, but the general idea goes the following. So in general, the grid cells, like in the rhinal cortex, for example, they they have these properties. That is, the cells have the same orientation and have same scales, are anatomically aligned together. Okay, and because of that, Leo Burgers and Christiana think they can actually using fMI trying to measure it, right? So in general, if you have certain voxels that if that trajectory you will have a higher firing rate compared to misaligned trajectory, right? So the idea is if I'm going to draw a line on a space, and if this line aligns with the mean orientation of the cells of the group of cells that the general mean preference, then it's going to intersect more of those firing fields, such that it's going to have higher activity compared to your misaligned ones. And indeed, they found that in the physical space, and NXR and Tim found that also in the continuous conceptual space. So in like across like I think like 10 years or so, there are three methods that you can use to capture this gray light code. One is called hexagonal modulation, another is called consistency, or also you can use in representation similarity. Okay, some of them would be univariant, some would be multivariant, and some might be more sensitive than other in different ways. So we're going to try all of them, and basically the result is the following: in either of those methods, you have gray light code identified in the essay, basically. Cool. And you can say, so you can also bring the trials basically on at which of the angles it belong to, whether it belong to the aligned angles or to the misaligned angles. And the red one is for the aligned angles, and for the gray one as misaligned angles. And here's the result. So basically you have stronger activity in the ESA when they are in the aligned angles versus misaligned. And this is specific to the six-fold hexagonal kind of symmetry, but not there for any of other symmetry. Okay, cool. And that is on average. And then because it's FMI, another thing we can do is we can do a between subject covariant analysis. So on the left, you can say, in general, if you do that at the voxel level and correct it at the whole brain, you say activation in the adrenal cortex. Either you put inference of H in, or you can in the lower panel. This is basically do this in anatomical defined adrenal cortex. Pick those values together, extract those values, and again you can say those correlations. And what's really cool is those behavior measures, those behavior like age-related development of inference performance is actually mediated by the gray light code measured in the essay. Cool. All right. And then, so there are two representations that we talk about, right? So if we think the gray cell would be representing the schema of the task, then as a schema, it should always be this gray light code, this 2D Euclidean space, right? Basically. But what would be the neural correlate encoding the concrete map, right? One way you can do that is you can actually build a representation similarity matrix where you use that to measure the actual Euclidean distance among all those objects, right? And you can put that in your fMRI data and say where in your brain actually encoding those Euclidean distance. And once you do that, you find a beautiful activation in the MPFC, and that does correlate it with age. And again, the mean activity is here and significant correlate with age. Okay. And what is cool is this distance code is stronger if you put this Euclidean distance in instead of this 1D distance. Okay. So of course they are correlated with the 1D distance, right? But this is a way to say the subject actually is building a 2D map rather than a lot of 1D hierarchies. Okay. So it seems in the brain, you can find two of those kind of representations. And then the next question is, what are their relationship? The thing we want to look for is, does this map-like representation is actually built upon on the schema representation? So one thing we can do is we can actually median split all the trials based on whether this orientation is aligned with the mean orientation versus not, right? And then you can calculate the distance code in the MPFC. And you can say, indeed, you have stronger distance coding in the MPFC when those trials are aligned with the mean orientation. And furthermore, you can say this distance code, we see the distance code is correlated with inference, but this correlation is actually mediated by the gray light code in the ether, right? So that is suggesting this people awake build these distance codes by the schema representation in the ether. Cool. So that is trying to answer the first question. And now to the second question, that is, how does the brain assimilate new knowledge into the existing schema if, if they do so? So this is Piaget's idea of assimilation. So what he thinks is assimilation is the integration of new objects or new situations and events into previous schemas. So here is our task, right? So after they have done the map-based inference of game one, we're going to introduce four new objects, and then we're going to embed those objects in the center of the existing map, and then subject's going to enter the FMI again and lead to do the non-local inference task. So the idea is if subjects maintain that schema and operationally defined, this maintained schema would mean the same orientation in the EC, right? If subjects have this consistent schema representation, they're going to support them to do the non-local inference. And indeed, this is what we find. Again, in the game two, we can find gray light code. And if you do the conjunction analysis between the game one and game two, you see the alignment of this map indeed is in the EC. Okay? And you can say the stronger this map alignment is between map one and map two, the better their performance is on the non-local inference after controlling, even after controlling for the game one. Okay, cool. And again, you can say you can also look for where in your brain actually encoding the distance between those newly introduced objects and the existing ones. That is the connections between new and old knowledge. And you can say it is MPFC that again linking these novel and old concepts together. And this is and that is and this effect is actually uh, significantly mediate this local inference ability. Okay, as people might still remember, in the very beginning of the behavior analysis, we have shown there is a selective age-related development on the local inference, even after we controlling for the game one, right? And this is basically telling you the new correlates underlying that is the development of the distance code in the MPFC that help you to link the old and new knowledge together. And another thing I haven't shown you is, again, it is same as the previous one. This distance code is based on the ESA schema code. That is the grid code, basically. All right. So this is all functional data in the task that give you a beautiful cellular mechanism saying the quality map is developed and is supported by the development of the gray light code. And now we're going to trying to link these cellular mechanisms with those structure markers you can get from structure MI and diffusion MI. Okay, so this is a panel. So what is this line? This is the brain chart that we can extract from these minions of the from this literature paper where they combine minions of MI structure and they can build and they can draw the line, say what the normative line would be. And you can say, and this each of the dot are all the subjects from current study, and you can say it in generally align with lines. And indeed, in general, with age, there is a general decay of this gray matter volume. And what is interesting is that if you do that for each of the ROI across the brain, in general, yes, there is a general decrease of all the cortical regions, but that's an interesting covariant in the EC, right? That actually increase positively with the age. Okay, the same thing goes for the inference as well. If you take the anatomical ROI of EC and MPFC together, you see a divergent patterns of them. And indeed, you can say this supporting effect, right? So yes, we all know the structure and function are correlated together. And indeed, this correlation is supported or mediated by the age, by the development. Okay, so hopefully through the last 30 minutes, you have I have kind of convinced you that this schema in the ESA and the distance in the MPFC are quite important. But how those two brain regions are talk to each other, right? It somehow you would imagine it have some physical connections between those two brain regions, and perhaps through development, these physical connections of those two brain regions also get developed, such that their communication become more efficient. Okay, so this is the next step we are doing. So we actually measure the structure connectivity between the MPFC and the ESA. So in general, you can say this correlation is indeed increased with age and underlying the influence. And you can, and what is cool is that um, this structure and to the this structure connectivity is correlated with the age, which is normally what people would do in developmental neuroscience. But what's really cool is here, because we have tasks, we can use the look for the relationship also with this neural code doing the task. And indeed, this structure connectivity, this correlation between structure connectivity and inference performance is actually mediated by this grid cell, grid code mediated or modulated distance code in the MPFC. We can also um, do a sub-region analysis, right? So because in the structure connectivity between EC and MPFC, you have three pathways. One is circular, one is usinate, and another is phonics. Okay, so you can do the analysis separately for each of those wide tracks, and it turns out only the circulum that actually gives the effect. That means through the communication through EC to MPFC and have a direct relationship with the quality map-based behavior is more related to the signal than Unix or phonics. All right. The one last thing is all the for people who are under 16. Okay, so we also have this Wechsler intelligence scale for children, and basically we can just do a massive correlation, right? And perhaps it's not surprising you have many things correlate with many scales of the. You have many things from the cognitive map-based measures with many of these scales or domains or subdomains from those standard intelligence tasks. This is basically showing the correlation graph. What you can do is normally when you have two sets of correlations, two sets of variables are correlated with each other, you can do a canonical correlation analysis. Right? And after computation, you would find that the only significant would be the first component. Okay, sorry, the first and the second components. And if you map all those things onto these two dimensions, you find something interesting. That is, those distance code and gray light code in EC and MPFC is actually more aligned in these 2D dimensions, more aligned with this. This is SPM, which is basically the standard driven with metric reasoning task, or the comprehension task, which is basically about abstract reasoning and comprehension ability. Okay, this is different compared to, for example, like digital span, which is a working memory thing, or coding, or similarity of block. Cool. So that is the first study. So hopefully that gives you three things. One is it link a cellular mechanism to cognitive development. and also predict real-world intelligence. And it tells you that this integration of new knowledge can be done through the alignment of grid code. And the last thing is the structure maturation between the EC and MPFC actually underlines the development of the cognitive map neural code in the brain as well as the behavior measures based on the cognitive map. So this is the first study. Before I continue, people have any questions? Hello. I think I heard something, but I can't be.
Or just no.
Hello.
We've got no questions in the audience currently. Oh, wait, one question. Ask it.
Yeah, so like in the distance coding part, so we
Yeah.
see that it's not only MPFC that is lightened up, but also there's something that's next to the posterior cingulate,
Yeah.
basically.
Right.
That is
Right.
like brightened
Yeah.
up. So could you talk a little more about that?
You mute
Thank you.
mute the thing.
You mean basically this region, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is not a typical posterior cingulate cortex region. So normally it would be more posterior, something over here. We haven't really focused on here. I mean, you can call that MCC, like medial or middle cingulate cortex. Or, I mean, if you are being generous, some people even call that a DACC because it actually there are some of the activation past this central line, basically. But no, we haven't looked at this um, for more detail, basically. So in the supplementary figure, in the supplementary information, we have done this ROI-based like analysis with inference and with age. So if you take ROI either through the whole cingulate cortex or actually using the PCC or the ACC together or separately or in like it doesn't like in the ROI analysis at least it doesn't correlate with age or with inference, basically.
Does anyone on Zoom want to ask a question? Sorry. Wait, can you press that and just like unmute it and then mute it when you're done.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was really cool. What happens if you break or violate the underlying structure of this data? So either while training them, you have nonsense correlations or like triangulate correlations where one thing is better than another in attack, and then you just have like say maple is better than bear, and bear is better than tree, tree is better than maple. Or when you integrate new knowledge, you then violate the structure whereby it's no longer linear and the calculation of the Euclidean distance then no longer follows this underlying structure. Do you then think that you get the same engagement of the MPFC and the EC? Or do you see anything else that might correlate to the violation of these expectations?
Sorry, I haven't heard you very clearly. Can you repeat yourself? I didn't get the part where you say there is a manipulation where it can violate the expectations. Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Yeah, sure. So either when you train the pairwise comparisons, you have some nonsense correlations in there that don't follow this linear structure. Or when you assimilate new knowledge, you then violate the underlying structure of this array, of this 2D array. Do you then see, or would you expect to see, neural correlates that map onto the violation of this expectation, or do you just expect to see a reduction in the representation of the EC and the MPFC?
Yeah, right. So just so I understand you correctly, so and just to be clear, so in this task, when we introduce new object, it doesn't violate the existing relationship, right? So for as far as the subject's concerned, the relationship preserves. Like if A is bigger than B, it's still A is bigger than B, right? Because all the learning is really just on the relative rank, so people don't really know the absolute coordinate like value, right? So indeed, what has changed is only the coordinate value. As a coordinate value, for example, like one become 1.5 or something, but the relationship among them are consistent. That's why we are saying the schema is consistent when they are trying to assimilate new knowledge. So if I understand you correctly, you are saying if in a situation where the schema is no longer consistent with the new information. Is that what you mean? And then what would you find? If this is question, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting one. I don't have answer to this. I think so. Based on the knowledge I know, like I mean, basically, if you change to a new environment, totally new environment, I mean, it is possible your grid cell are also going to do remap, right? They don't really understand what is going on. And whether there are interesting things, as in you only changed the local relationship, but the global thing are still maintained, would you see some subtle change of those grid cell representations? Like people have seen those things in the rodent E phase, right? So like people saying gradually you say grid cell representation going to be more attract to the reward space, like like especially overnight, basically. So I would imagine you would say something like this. You would say these local distortions, but but globally the representation are maintained. Um, yeah, that would be my prediction if I understand you correctly.
The question to
I think that was great, Yunzhe. I
Okay,
think we're ready to move on to the next part.
okay, cool. So I think I have like 10 minutes or something left. So I'm going to quickly go through the next part. So the next part is really trying to answer this question. So I mean, if you believe me, you would think, okay, so it seems that is through development, you say the also the development of this gray light code, and it seems it underlies this age-related increase of inferential behavior. Okay, so this is basically localization or representation idea, right? So how you represent those structural knowledge and how such representation change with age and underlies the increase of inferential behavior. But it doesn't tell us how is the quality map formed through development, right? So one idea that we have would be we know that you can build a quality map, you can build a structural knowledge. Like one way to do that would be during the time when you memorize things, right? Perhaps when you memorize things, you can already do the reorganization of those knowledge in a structured way. But most of the time we actually reorganize those knowledge during rest, right? During rest, like I guess many people have this like experience, like after you learn something in the daytime and after sleep, and when you wake up, you have some new understandings of the things you have just learned, right? This is because during the sleep or during the rest, your brain do this active memory consolidations, right? Trying to structure and to organize your experience into a structured manner. So this structural knowledge can help you in future, can help you in the future for either inferring new relationship or for assimilating new knowledge. So that is the thing we're trying to capture. So recently, both in the monkeys and in the humans, we find during the rest and mostly in animal studies, also during sleep, you see the coordinations between the hippocampus replay and the cortical regions. Like one particular set of the cortical regions is default mode network. Okay, so like what Cameron Higgins from Mark Wallish lab have shown is they took the the data set we have previously collected and using this dynamic network analysis in MEJ, what they find is you see a beautiful tempo coordinations between replay, like which is basically those we call repo events, and the activation of the default mode activity. Okay, and when you do this GLM, as you can say, when you align at the time when replay happens, you see a selective increase of the network activation probability. So this is so in their data, the blue is the default mode, and the red is basically the alpha attention network. Okay, so oh sorry, I should I should make it clear. So replay is a phenomenon where people doing rest and sleep that quickly revisit, for example, their past experience. Okay, but in a very time compressed manner, basically. And then you also people also find doing mental simulation when you are planning, for example, which step to go, which route to take. You also have this replay event where it mimic or simulate those possible trajectories. So this set of study make people think that one way to build cognitive map, one way to form cognitive map would be this coordination of hippocampal repo and associated replay and the activation of default mode, right? So the idea is roughly corresponding to this complementary learning system, right? The idea is shortly the memory is encoded in the hippocampus, and during sleep and during the rest, you have this replay, you have these memories in the hippocampus replayed back to your cortical regions. And your cortical regions, for example, your default mode network is listening to your hippocampus and trying to extract those meaningful things and encode those things into their existing structural knowledge. Cool. So yeah, I mean this is a Kaplan's work where they take the data where lung tests have previously required, where they have simultaneous recording of the fMRI and also the electrophysiology data directly in the hippocampus, and you can say indeed after a repo onset, you see a selectively increase of the board activity in the default mode, but not for other network, also not for other like frequency bands, basically. Cool. And also, there are studies. Well, again, it's correlation in essence. What is shown is like again take a lot of data. So actually, here each of the dot is one subject, and you can see again it's like tens of thousands of subjects. As you can say, through age, right, from age of 7 to age of 11, you see the thing that actually increased are the default mode, right? Basically, well, also your sensory motor network, basically, and the thing that shrink is like this visual network or something, basically. So the thing get more developed is this default mode network. Cool. All right. So what we're gonna to how we're going to solve this problem? So the thing I haven't told you about previous study is that before they enter the fMI, before they do the 2D inference task, they actually first being invited to took a MEG study. So basically, the same to tell you is this is the same task from the same set of the subjects, except before they are doing the 2D inference task in the fMI, they are first put in the MEG scan to do an inference task. Okay, so in this inference task, this not 2D but always 1D. Okay, so again, it follows the same trial structure as those 2Ds. It has one picture presented, blank screen, and another picture. And after that, we're going to cue them the relevant dimension. But except compared to the 2D, the only difference here is that they're going to compare the relationship within a feature dimension, right? So actually, in this task particular, the subject actually do not need to form a 2D map. Okay? So they can just do everything in 1D, right, basically. Because all of those comparison is done within a feature dimension. Yes, I heard that some questions. Is that quiz? Is that questions? Sorry.
No, I think it's all good.
Okay, cool. All right. So in general, you can say so. So in the previous study, 250 subjects took part in that study, and 203 subjects actually formed the whole thing. And for this one, like we have 100 each subjects actually took this MEG study. As you can see, yeah, in general, you say, which is not surprising, right? So you say um, the inference accuracy increase with age, whereas the response time decrease with age. And the same thing goes also with their intelligence scale. This is advanced Raven progress matrix test, basically measuring their reasoning ability. Cool. So because it's MEG, we can actually try to decode using the MEG data. We can try to say whether we can decode those images, and you can say we actually have a pretty good classifier for each of the images. So this is the classifier of the pepper, and you can say only the pepper classifier give you about chance, well, stronger decoding accuracy when the pepper is on the screen, but not other classifiers. And in general, your classifier actually picked around 300 milliseconds for decoding those pictures. So one thing we're going to look for is to say how is the decoding accuracy change with age. And cross-sectional speaking, because this is data we have, cross-sectional speaking, you actually have a positive correlation between the decoding accuracy and the age. We can now looking for the replay, right? As we, as I just mentioned, in this task, actually subjects can just do 1D, right? They can just build a 1D linear hierarchies, basically. So, and then we can look for replay. So both before and after the inference task, you have a 5 minutes resting state scan. And you can see here, we do not have any replay. Or if the subject already built a 2D map, you would imagine the subjects can replay, like from the clock, they can replay the nearby object, like the maples, like the football, like the clock, like the hand, for example. And indeed, this is what you found. And what is cool is, in general, on average, you have stronger replay after the task compared to before the task. Okay, and this is a replay of the 2D. That is a replay representing the 2D map simultaneously during the rest. Okay, and what is really cool is this replay is actually lective correlated with age. Or putting this way, when you are younger, you actually need more replays, like to representing the 2D map compared to when you are older. Okay, so this might speak to the idea that is you only need replay to maintaining the representation when you lead it, right? So if you really already have the 2D map in your mind, you don't really need to rehearsing in your brain, then you don't have that strong representation. That would be one of the explanation. But we're going to say later on what would be other data supporting those things. Cool. So here's the correlations with replay. Now we're going to look for the resting state network. This is really following the footstep from Mark Wallish group. So we also in doing this, we also in close collaborations with Mark's group. So just putting a very high level conceptual space, conceptual level, what we do is really do the beamforming to translate the data from sensor space to the source space. Through the hidden Markov model, we can try to infer both the observation model and their transition probabilities. And one of the observation model of the latent space, this we call the state one, looks like default mode. Okay. And then we can look for their characteristics like the occupancies, like how long does it happen, and intervals, like how long does it happen happen the first time and then the second time? What is the interval between them, right? And also their power and coherence. You can see your default mode looks quite different. The power is strong, like for the default mode, especially in the like theta power domain, and the coherence also is stronger around this theta power and the theta. Okay, but none of them correlate with age. Okay, all of those network dynamics characteristics is not correlate with age. So, but what is interesting is, indeed, you can find these coordinations. So each of the color here is the activation of one of the resting state network. And this triangle and this dotted line is when does replay happens. You can say a lot of replay happens align with the activation of the default mode, right? And indeed, when you do this analysis, that is trying to predict the change of the activation probabilities of those resting state network as the time of the replay onset. And you can say, so zero is the replay onset, and you can say like 30 or 40 minutes later, you say the peak of the activation probability of the default mode. So the first is the default mode, the yellow is the visual cortex. As you can say, only the default mode, only the replay aligned default mode activation correlate with age, but the replay aligned visual cortex doesn't. And what's really cool is because it's the same set of subjects, so we can indeed link this replay aligned default mode activation during rest measured in MEJ and relate that with their gray light code of ESA measured on task in the ESA. Cool. So this is basically saying, in general, although the replay alone decreases with age, but this replay aligned DMN activation actually increase with age. And such strength of this activation is positively correlated with the gray light code measured in the ESA. Okay, now we need to ask, how does it happen, right? How does the replay is decrease along the age, but their computation seems to become more efficient, right? One idea would be through age, you actually have more and more precise coordination of replay and default mode, right? As we have seen previously, like the default mode